Hi, I am Mrs. Hodges, and I wanted to take a moment to introduce myself, let you see who I was. I'm really excited about our video notes, and so I'm welcoming you to our video notes. So here is lesson number 2, and so let's get started.
Okay, hi everybody. My name is Miss Tickle, and for those of you that don't have me for world history, I am the other sixth grade world history teacher. So for those of you that have Miss Hodges or Mr. Kennedy, nice to meet you. We are on to Chapter 1, Lesson 2, How Does a Historian Work? And it matters because knowing how historians work helps us to understand historical information. Okay, don't forget, guys, as you're reading these video notes and writing things in, you can always pause the video, you can rewind it and replay it. Okay, don't feel like you're rushed or having to move on too fast. It is there for you to pause it. Okay, what is evidence? Evidence is something that shows proof or an indication that something is true. Historians could use evidence in the form of material objects, such as artifacts and fossils, or evidence may appear in documents or written materials that were created during a historical event. If you think in terms of life today, evidence is used in court all the time. It's the only way that people can be convicted or acquitted of a crime that they could be charged with. There has to be evidence, there has to be proof. So historians use that also to make sure that something is historically accurate. They need to have evidence for it, and that evidence may come in writing. It may be in an artifact or a fossil, but it's something tangible that they can hold on to that shows them that there is evidence.
Hello everyone, this is Mr. Kennedy here, one of the other sixth grade world history teachers. Right now you should probably already have your video notes open, and we're going to go over a couple things on the next couple slides. So make sure we're having our pencil out and ready to copy in on this slide, which we're going to go over a primary source. So a primary source is an account of an event created by someone who actually witnessed or took part in it. If you witnessed it, you yourself could be a primary source and write down your record of the event because you took part in the event. So we're also going to go over a couple of these sources here that you see around on your screen right now. So right here, a map. It's important to look at the title and where the source was created and who created the source. We also have on the bottom right a picture of Abraham Lincoln. So this photo appears to be old, but sometimes sources can be tricky to see where they actually came from. Other primary sources are going to be like artifacts that were created in the time period that we might be studying. So it's important to always remember that a primary source was someone who actually witnessed or took part in it. Think of like a soldier that fought in World War II, or think about a person who actually witnessed a major event in history happening. The other source that you will see from time to time is going to be a secondary source. Now, a secondary source is information gathered by someone who did not take part or witness the event. A secondary source is going to be created after the event took place. So, Mr. Kennedy did not fight in World War II, but I might write something about it. I would write or create a secondary source. Now, your secondary sources are going to be things like a textbook or something that was created that usually has factual information that was created after the time period that it was written. Other sources include encyclopedias and documents that were created, like I said, after an event by someone who did not witness the event. It's important to remember these important questions to ask about sources. Is the source reliable? Now we're going to go over what reliable truly means when we're looking at a document or an artifact in history. So it's important to ask these questions like where the source was produced, when the source was produced, and why this was created. Was this a journal created by someone who wants to remember the events later in time? Or was this an event that someone created it for further reference in their own personal life? So remember these facts on reliability when you're looking at a source. It's also important to remember the point of view of a source. Now, there can be points of views that are going to alter dramatically on the same event. That right there might be like the winner and the loser of the event, such as a basketball game, a battle, or even a war. And what is the author's view on life or an event? Are they biased? Now, we're going to go over bias as well to make sure that there might be any emotion created when an author or someone produces a source.
All right, so we want to talk about bias. And bias is an unreasoned emotional judgment about people and events. And that's because we use our past experiences and we bring them into what we do. And so everybody has a bias about a lot of things. You're either biased for or against chocolate ice cream. You either really, really like it or you really, really don't. There's no scientific reason for you really liking that or not. It's just your emotional judgment about that. And so people do that about events and they do that about people too. Sometimes we don't see things like they really are. We see things as we are. So we think everybody should like chocolate just because we like chocolate too. And so that's when you're reading a document that somebody's written in history, then you have to figure out what is their bias, where are they coming from, what is their experience told them, what are they bringing to the table in their article. Is it historical facts or is it got a bias? Is it part of their emotional judgment? And so historians have to work through that and figure out a way to find out what is really true. So historians use information from primary and secondary sources, like Mr. Kennedy told you about primary and secondary, and they use those to try to figure out the most likely interpretation based on the evidence that they have. So they look through all that they can find and they're making judgments about what they found. And they have to gather information and data, and they have to gather a lot of it because you have to find more than one source that's going to support your point of view. More than one piece of evidence that says, yes, this is true, or no, this is not true. So you have to look for various sources. And then when you find various sources, that may lead you into research as a historian to focus just on one thing. So if you do a lot of research about the Civil War, and then eventually you find out that you like one general really, really a lot, you want to find out all about him, you might narrow your focus down and only study what that general had to say and only study what battles he was in. And that would bring you to a conclusion. You might decide about that final general if you thought that he was a very good military genius. He had a lot of good battle plans, and so you would research that. And your final decision is reached by reasoning. And you look at all the facts and all the evidence you can find from various sources, and then you make a conclusion, which that should be based on evidence. Again, not just your opinion. Now, you really liked this general. It may be that he was not a good general at all. You just liked his personality. And that's okay. You just have to be aware when you're drawing your conclusion that you just really like him, even though he wasn't like the best. So that's called a historical interpretation. So we're looking at historical interpretations. Sometimes historians disagree about their interpretations of these facts. And a good historian will evaluate all the sources, and you can explain both sides as to what is good and what is bad, or what is right and what is wrong, or how this could be interpreted or how it's not interpreted. And so you can see both sides. So right here, we got these two people looking at these rods on the floor, these beams, and one of them says, I see 3, and one of them says, no, there's 4, 3. You know, they're kind of arguing about that. Whose interpretation is right? How many do you see? Yeah, it's a little confusing. If you look in one spot, you see 3, but if you look on the other end, you see 4. I think there are 4, but I'm not sure. So that's just an interpretation. We can talk about that in class. Come and let me know what you think about that. Even if you're not in my class, you know, come by and say, I see 3, I see 4. Tell me what you saw. All right, so now we're going to use all that information, and I want you to explain why some historians differ in their historical interpretations of these events. So explain why some historians differ in their interpretation of a historical event. Why would one historian see it one way and another historian see it another way? You should use vocabulary words in your explanation. Now, I know there may not be some vocabulary words in everything that we just discussed, but you have your vocabulary listed on the front of your packet. So go back and look at those words. See if there's any words that you can use. That gives you historical accuracy when you use the facts that you've been given. So to answer this question, you would say some historians differ in their interpretation of historical events because, and then you'll tell us why. Make sure you're using part of the question, and then you're citing evidence from our notes. Oops, let's go back. You're citing evidence from our notes. So be sure you're doing that. This needs to be about a 3 to 5 sentence answer. It needs to be readable. We have to be able to read it. For my class, if I can't read it, you're going to have to do it again. It has to be readable. Doesn't matter to me if you use pink ink or purple ink or blue or brown. Doesn't matter to me what color you use to write with, but I have to be able to read it. Okay, so make sure that I can read your answer. All right, good luck, and I will see you in class.